Hello everybody. So today we're gonna talk about chapter 5 part 2 access control system that we started this chapter in the last class. So we have two main agenda for today: implementing access control system and formal authentication systems. To implement access control system, there are mainly three methods. One is access control list, group policies, and the third method is we can use the account restrictions. So these are the three main methods through which we can implement access control, any access control system. So let's start with the first one, the access control list, ACL. So in access control list, what exactly happens? In access control list, we actually assign or set the permissions or the rules with the objects. So basically, the definition of access control list is set of permissions. Set of permissions are assigned, or you can say attached, to objects. So set of permissions are assigned or attached to object, and it also specifies which subject can access the object and what actions they can take. It is exactly the same way, like if you remember the rule-based access control model. So it is the rule-based access control model is basically the access control list-based authentication. So basically, if you have, for example, this particular printer or that computer, so rule will be attached with this particular computer, and whenever anybody, let's say this user, wants to access this this particular computer, so what's going to happen? User will request to security kernel. Now kernel will actually look the rules of this particular device, look for the rules and see whether this subject can access this object or not. So this is access control list. Second technique to implement is the group policies. And the concept of group policies was introduced by Microsoft. So basically it's a feature introduced by Microsoft in Windows. And Windows, which through which are that allows server administrators to control access of the resources from server side, or you can say remotely. So they can do all the configuration management and configuration setting from server side. There is another feature of the group policy introduced by Microsoft for local computers. This is known as local group policy. So local group policy is basically for the local machines, like individual computer. And if you want to access your, or if you want to design or set your own local policies, you can actually just hit run and type MMC, Microsoft Management Console, or you can directly type local group policy. So you can type the local group policy and you can access, and you can set your password expiration date, you can set your account lockdown policies and all that stuff by getting into your local group policy. The third method of implementing the access control is called account restrictions. Account restrictions are basically, for example, you can set some restrictions to account. For example, your card might not work. For example, your RFID card that you usually use to access your building might not work on weekend. That's basically what account restrictions are. So what is account restrictions? For example, we can restrict the access of users to resources for certain days or time. For example, you cannot access your for example the database after office hours and all that kind of things. That's another way to implement it. If you see the PowerPoint slide, you can see some graphical representation of that as well. Another very important thing under account restrictions are there are two types of accounts. One is called account which is called orphan account. Another type of account is called dormant accounts. So these are the two types of accounts that security administrator really have to take care of. Orphan accounts are basically those accounts that remain active even after employee left the organization. So employee had left the organization and accounts are still there. These type of accounts are called orphan accounts. And these account has to be terminated immediately. We need to identify and terminate them. Dormant accounts are basically accounts that have not been used for long. Accounts that have not been used for long are known as dormant account. So again, dormant account, we need to actually keep an eye, like we need to maintain the logs for the dormant accounts and check the activities and supervise them. Next, the second agenda item is the authentication services. So as we already discussed a lot about authentication services, authentication is basically verification of credentials of user. Not the user, we just verify the credentials and then give them access or block their access to the systems. So verification of credential is called authentication services. And usually most of the service provider, they use a specific server to actually provide authentication plus access control, and that server is called AAA server, where the first A is for authentication. We can use any kind of authentication factor to perform authentication. Second A is for authorization, that control access, like how much you can access. Third A is for accounting. After giving you access, then systems start maintaining a log. Now there are many types of authentication or AAA server. Some of the servers are very commonly used. One of the servers is called Radius. We still use Radius server in the captive portal approach. Like for example, if you go to restaurants or for example, a motel. So what happens when you try to connect with their access point? So you need to enter your guest ID or receipt number. Then once you enter that, then you can you can use the access point. So Radius stands for remote authentication dial-in service. Service is Radius. Then we have ACS, total access control system. Then we have Kerberos. There are many other systems, but our book has discussed mainly these three type of authentication, AAA servers in fact. So let's start with the Radius. So Radius is basically this particular server or this particular authentication system was developed in 1992. It was developed in 1992 and it became telecom industry standard. It's a telecom industry standard. The best part is of Radius is it can handle large amount of data. So many users can be handled, and we still use that particular model in our captive portal approach. For example, let me give you a basic idea how Radius actually works. So let's say this is the user, and user wants to access internet or some resources. So user will actually send his user ID or the password, this particular combination, to AAA server, Radius server through access point. So let's say this is access point router. So user will actually send user ID and the password to access point. Access point will forward this particular information to AAA server or Radius server in our case. So Radius server, and Radius server is connected or check user ID from the user database of authenticated users. And for example, after success, for example, if a match occurs, then what's going to happen? It will let the Radius server know that this subject can access the internet or the services. So what will happen? Radius server will actually send the acknowledgement to access point and allow the user to access internet, and then also Radius server will activate the accounting logs. So just to record the user activity. So this is the way how Radius server in fact works. Next is the few more things about Radius server. One of the you can say con of Radius server is unencrypted communication. Unencrypted communication. Second, no device authentication. No device authentication means, for example, you can bring your own rogue access point. You can bring your own access point, connect with the Ethernet cable, and then it can start broadcasting the signal. So there is no device authentication in Radius. Second authentication model is Kerberos. So Kerberos is basically an academic model, highly secure model. We use this particular model in single sign-on, for example, where you just need username and password and you can access multi-vendor products. So Kerberos is basically invented by MIT professors. So it's basically free for schools and universities. Kerberos is basically, it provides authentication plus encryption. So it's a highly secure kind of authentication system. So after basic authentication, what's going to happen? User will be issued a ticket. So let's say after basic authentication, user will be issued a ticket. We can call it token. And then user can access resources using that ticket. For example, if you go to Disneyland, what's going to happen? You actually pay amount and you get a ticket, or you got a ticket. You just have to present that particular ticket or the token and you can take any ride. Exactly the same way in Kerberos. What happens? Once you actually do a basic authentication, username and password, then you will be issued a ticket. You can actually show that ticket to a Hotmail, Clawmail, D2L, and then you can access those resources. This is the way how Kerberos actually works. Last is the total access communication, access control communication, TAC-ACS. First of all, it is compatible with Unix systems. Okay. It is similar to Radius. It provides encryption, so compatible with Kerberos. Compatible with Kerberos, and the best part is basically it is centralized and specifically designed for web applications. So that's it for chapter 5. If you guys have any question, please bring up those questions in our online session. Thank you very much.